Alright everybody, what I got here is the Sony FX30 cinema line camera, and here's my little review on this. I'm not going to get too much into technical aspects, but I'm going to get into the experience that I've had with it, why I have it, and who this camera is for. Okay, first of all, this camera is pretty much a cinema camera. It's not great for pictures. If you notice in the back of it, doesn't have a viewfinder or anything like that to it. There's no viewfinder, and it's pretty much just for filming movies, things like that. And I'm going to get into it, why I have it and what I shoot with it. First of all, if you want to take advantage of this camera at its fullest, this is the Ninja 5. I'm using that to shoot this. This does not shoot 60 frames per second raw. It'll shoot 60 frames per second, non-raw images, movies. But this one, this is the Ninja 5 Plus. As you can see, the Plus over here. This will shoot 4K 120 frames per second. If you could look at the specs here, it'll shoot 60 frames per second. It'll also shoot raw 60 frames per second. It'll actually shoot 8K if you want to. Okay, was the Fujifilm X-T4 camera. This camera is a great camera. It's good for doing the type of shooting that I've done. It'll shoot log. It'll shoot 60 frames per second, 4K. This camera here, the Sony FX30, will shoot 6K, downsizing to 4K. That's what I do. I downsize my images from higher resolutions to 4K because nobody has 6K videos on their computer, not for watching anyway, and not for viewing over the internet. I don't know any internet site that hosts videos that is higher than 4K quality. Being that said, the reason why I shoot in higher resolutions is because the image is that much better when it's downscaled to 4K. So your original image, master image, is very high resolution, and you're outputting it to a lesser resolution, and it looks that much better. Ask any professional cinematographer, they'll tell you that. So what Sony has done is taken the body of the FX3 and created the FX30. The only difference is the sensor size. That's it. This camera has tons of fitting mounts. You see all these little holes. They're for like add-ons and cages and rigging this up, especially made just for video. Sony's really came up with something really great. This is also, it's a 26 megapixel sensor, so this is awesome. You don't need any more than that with an APS-C sensor. 26 megapixels is very adequate. The 4K 120 FPS gives you a 1.6 times crop, which is not bad. It's great, and it works flawlessly. I really like it. Also, this camera, you can still take pictures with it. Although it's not adequate for high-speed shooting or sports or fast action events, I wouldn't use this camera for that. Also, it doesn't have a mechanical shutter, only an electronic shutter. So if you're more into photography and serious about that, this is not the camera for you. Now, the profiles that you can shoot with this camera, S-Cinetone, Cine 1, Cine 2, Cine 3, those are great profiles, and you don't have to do much editing in post-production. You get a beautiful picture straight out of the camera. The video is flawless. This is for people who are just newcomers to doing cinematography. So this also shoots 4K 60 frames per second raw, 16-bit raw. That is awesome. Um, Shooting raw is the same thing as like photography, where you have, you know, your pictures are raw. You have all the information there, so you can do a lot of adjustments, color grading, exposure, changing ISO, changing the white balance, all that stuff. Shooting raw gives you all that flexibility. Where if you're not shooting raw, you're very limited to how much you can change the colors or exposure without the image falling apart. Also, shooting raw requires quite a bit of media space. You need large media cards because it takes a hell of a lot of space because there's more information per frame. So they're very bulky, big files. Not to mention, when you're editing RAW, you need a really beefy, high-end, super fast computer to edit RAW with the high-end graphics card, which are very expensive. They're in like $1,200 to $2,000 just for the graphics card, not the computer itself. I'd say to be able to edit RAW flawlessly on a computer, you would need to spend probably about $6,000 or more for video editing RAW. Okay, so when you're not shooting RAW, this gives you the capability of shooting XAVHS, which is, you know, a compressed 4K, XHVC, which is pretty good. It's long GOP and it gives you, you know, better quality than the HS. Then you got XAVC SI. SI, the I stands for All Intra. All these codecs are in 10-bit 422. The quality of 10-bit 422 is very, very good. And I don't see anything wrong with it, you know, except for the RAW. The RAW is 16-bit 444, like I said, which has much more information, very much, you know, higher quality. And by the way, shooting in RAW at 16-bit is 4.8K is what you get. That's downscaled to. It's 4.8K, almost 5K, downscaled from 6K. So when you're filming, it's recording in 6K and then writing to the media card at 4.8K, which is almost 5K. So you get a 5K video file. I still downgrade that to 4K. All the other modes, the codecs that are not RAW, are recording in 6K, downscaled to 4K. Now, with Sony, you can shoot in log, which is you can shoot with S-Log3. This camera has S-Log3, which is awesome. There's S-Log1, 2, and some cameras don't have 2 because S-Log3 is so much better anyway. Now, and also you can shoot S-Log3 Cine EI. Cine EI is basically a very higher dynamic range mode of shooting, and you get the options of only 2 ISOs. They're the base ISO, which the low end is 800 ISO, the high end is 2500 ISO. Those 2 ISOs give you the best quality and dynamic range that you can get out of this camera. Now, if you want to shoot in flexible log, then you can do that as well, and you can use any ISO number you want, starting from 200 all the way up. I think it's 20,000 or something like that. Also, what I like about this is his articulating screen. You can move it around, flip it, use it like this. If you're shooting low like this, you can look at the screen down this way, or if you're shooting up down this way, you can flip the screen around, which articulating screen I like. Also, unlike most cameras, this has a full-size HDMI socket, which is much better. I don't like all the other cameras that are using micro HDMI sockets. They're small and they get loose, and then eventually they break, and then you got to send your camera in to fix the socket. With full size, that doesn't happen. It's much more sturdier and gives you more, more leverage to move the wire around and stuff like that without worrying about it breaking off. So for media storage, this has 2 SD card slots, and it also has 2 CF Express Type A card slots, which is really not ideal. CF Express Type A, I have no idea why Sony continues to use that. It costs 3 times as much money for each card, and the highest capacity for the size you can get is only 160 gigabytes. With CF Express Type B, you can get 1 to 2 terabytes, and the cost for 160 gigabytes costs around $500. So 1 terabyte for an SSD, which is a solid state drive, which is what I use because I use the Ninja. Shooting with the Ninja gives you lots of advantages, higher quality video, and also where you're storing your media. It uses an SSD drive, I believe, like this one. This is an SSD drive. And for a 4 terabyte, actually, for a 1 terabyte SSD drive, you can get that for around $110. For 1 terabyte, $110. That's incredible. That's great. Whereas an SD card for a 512 gigabyte will run you around $500. Where a 512 gigabyte SD card will run you around $600, and that's only half the size of 1 terabyte. So you would need $1,200 to match the 1 terabyte SSD drive that only costs you $110. A 4 terabyte SSD will cost you around $429. 4 terabytes for $429. Where using an SSD for 4 terabytes is $1,700. Shooting with the Ninja is much more cost effective, much better way to go. The media companies who make the SD cards and the CF Express Type B and A cards are the same manufacturers who make the SSD drives. Why they charge 3 to 5 times as much for the SD cards, I'll tell you why, is because people who have cameras need the media to take their pictures and record their pictures and video on, so they'll pay it, not realizing, these media companies who manufacture these cards and SSD drives are one and the same, and it costs about the same price for these manufacturers to manufacture a 1 terabyte SSD drive as it does for a 1 terabyte SD card. Same amount of money. It's costing the same thing. Only they're making 5 times as much money off the SD cards. Why? Because you need it. There's nothing else they can do. So basically, they're ripping you off. Now this camera comes with IBIS, which is image stabilization. It means if you're handhelding, it's not going to be as jerky. It'll stabilize it for you. I use standard because standard doesn't have a crop, whereas active stabilization has a crop on it, so I don't use that. The other thing is, the best thing about Sony is they got the best autofocus tracking system anywhere. There isn't a camera out there that will autofocus track people or objects or whatever as good as this camera. It's flawless. It doesn't mess up where other cameras always mess up, and you can rely on this. Sony has the best autofocus system anywhere, and that's one of the reasons why I switched to Sony. The other thing about this camera that's great is the overlays. The information. It has your shutter speed and ISO and all the information, even the volume. It's all on the bottom or the top, nothing blocking the screen. So I can choose the way my displays are, and I have nothing blocking the screen. You see all the information, the battery life, all that stuff, that's out of the picture, right on a black outline of the video screen. So you have nothing blocking your image, so you can see what's going on, which is great, which I love this. It's absolutely fantastic. Now, one of the great things about this camera is the battery life. You get about 1 hour shooting 4K 60 frames per second, where a lot of other cameras you can only get 20 minutes. I get 8 hours because I use an external power source. So in here, you can hook up this Anchor power core. It's a power delivery. This uses USB-C for the power delivery. This uses for charging batteries. You can use it to charge your camera or use it to supply power to your camera so it's not draining the battery. Very ideal. I get about 8 hours of constant video with this. This is unbelievable, and you don't have to change your battery. So this camera was just released on October 24th, 2022, just a few days ago. And there's a big demand for it, so it was hard to get it. The stores didn't get them till like a day after to 2 days after. And I've been waiting for this camera, and it's a great camera. It's unbelievable. I think it's worth the money. It costs you, a very low amount of money for what you get out of this camera. So, like I said, this review is basically to give you information of what this camera can do, and who this camera is for, and some tips and ideals about using this camera. So I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, you can click like, and if you want to see more videos like this or be alerted of more videos like this, you can click on subscribe. So I hope this helps you all, and thanks for watching.